Over the past 10 years, I've built a property portfolio worth almost $40 million and I'm not even 30 years old. And along the way, I've learnt 10 critical lessons that has allowed me to scale my portfolio and my wealth much faster than I could have ever dreamed. I'm going to take you through each and every year since I started investing back in 2015 and run you through the critical lesson that I learnt at that year. And each year I've learnt that every lesson has been more important than the last one that I learned. And by you learning these lessons in this video that took me 10 years to learn, you can go and build the wealth that I've been able to build without the headaches that it's taken me to be able to build it. Now, before we get into it, I want to give you context to where I am right now. I'm 28 years old. My property portfolio is worth almost $40 million. It consists of 15 assets and it's made up of residential property, commercial property, and rural property. And it all started back in 2015 when I was 18, turning 19 years old, working as a laborer in the construction industry, purchasing my first property. So back in 2015, the lesson that I learned is a little bit of sacrifice goes a long way. And this lesson runs even more true now that I have hindsight to be able to look back on the last 10 years of my life. So when I was 15 years old, I got kicked out of school and jumped straight into the construction industry as a laborer. Now, the awesome thing about being a laborer in the construction industry is that you are not paid based on your age or based on your experience. You are simply paid to be a laborer. So I was earning about $70,000 as a 15-year-old kid laboring in the construction industry, which meant two things. I either had the ability to save a significant amount of money because I had little expenses, I was young, and I had every reason to save my money. Or the second option is I could have said, I'm young, I'm earning good money, and instead of saving it, I'm going to go and spend it because that's what you do when you're young. You should live up your life. Now, fortunately for myself, I chose option one, which was to be young, but to save my money because I had such low living expenses. Now, when I look at my friends group and what they were doing, a lot of them had gotten into their apprenticeships or they'd started part-time work while they were still at school or going to university. Regardless of what they were earning or what they were doing, they were essentially earning the money in one hand and spending it with the other. And because of that, they didn't build up any savings and they didn't have the ability to go and purchase their first property like I did. But what they did have the ability to do was they had the ability to go on holidays. They had the ability to buy the car that they wanted. They had the ability to go and live their life as a young person. That's the sacrifice that I'm talking about. I did sacrifice the holidays. I didn't go overseas until I was in my early 20s. I did sacrifice going out on the weekends and partying and spending my money on alcohol and everything else that goes with it because I was working every Saturday. So I was working 6 days a week, every single week. And what it allowed me to do is save my first deposit. And when you are younger, again, the thing I've learned now in hindsight is it is actually the easiest time to go and buy property because you don't have any of the baggage that life throws at you as you start to get older, like commitments to relationships, like kids, like societal pressures of things that you should be doing at certain ages. So making the sacrifice when I was young, when it was easier to do, was one of the key things that allowed me to save my first deposit and to get into the property market. That property I bought for $720,000 and its value now is double what I paid for it. So if that is all I did, and then after I bought that first property, I went and did all the things that my friends were doing, I would still be over $700,000 richer than I was back in 2015, just by simply making a little bit of sacrifice and buying that first asset. So that is the key number one lesson, is to make a little bit of short-term sacrifice, and I can assure you that your future self will thank you for it. The key lesson from 2016, which is when I was 19, turning 20 years old, was that 2 is better than 1 and 10 is better than 2. Now, what I mean by that is by having goals and having aspirations, you can achieve more than just by humming through life and not setting any goals or aspirations. So once I purchased my first property in 2015, I then got hooked on the idea of building wealth and property investing. I also then found a mentor that I started to replicate my journey around, because I then knew someone who had been and done what I wanted to do, which was to build a significant amount of wealth and to live an incredible lifestyle. So as soon as I started to visualize my life and set the goals that I wanted, I then set the goal to purchase my second property. And combining the lesson that I learned in 2015, which was a little bit of sacrifice goes a long way, plus the lesson I had now learned in 2016, which is 2 is better than 1 and 10 is better than 2, I then set the goal for my second property. And fortunately for me, I was still able to save a lot of money. Plus my first property that I purchased had also grown in value, which then gave me the ability to go and purchase my second property before the age of 21. And because I had now found a mentor who had a significant portfolio of more than 10 properties and more than $20 million in value, I then thought to myself, well, if I can have 2 properties, what's stopping me from then having 10 properties? And that was the lesson around, if you can visualize it and you can set a goal around it and you do the actions on a daily basis to be able to achieve that goal, anything is achievable with the right action and the right time frame. So now I had secured my second property. I then set the goal to say, well, I want something much bigger than that. I then set my first list of goals, of which I still have in the notes of my phone. And the goals were set from 2016 to 2026, so a 10-year period. We haven't even reached 2026 yet at the time of filming this video, and I've ticked every single one of those goals off, plus more. And the reality is, when I actually set those goals back in 2016, the goals that I had set after sort of 2020, I actually didn't know how I was going to achieve it. And they did feel like a bit of a pipe dream. But the reality is I had set them, I could start visualizing them and start taking actions towards those goals. And that's what allowed me to start to gain momentum and start to then move on to how can I purchase my third property and hit those other goals that I had set. Now in 2017, I turned 21 and life taught me a very valuable lesson. So up until I was 21, I had been with the same partner since I was 17 years old, and I had this vision of the life that I thought I was going to have. 2017 come around and my life changed. I split up with that partner. I moved to a new location, which was 2 hours away from Sydney. And all of a sudden I was in this world that I wasn't familiar with, a world that I didn't plan for. I'd started a new job. And at the time I was questioning, have I made the right decision here? Because obviously I'm still very young. I'm 21 years old, still trying to work life out. And the year prior, I just set all of these goals to be able to achieve certain things and hit certain targets. And now all of that stuff was up in the air because I had just had huge life changes with a relationship breakdown, plus changing locations. Now that was a very choppy time in my life. I spent 6 to 9 months not really knowing what I was doing, not knowing whether I'd made the right decision, partying and doing all the stuff that I hadn't done up until that point because I was so focused on buying properties and building my wealth. Now again, looking back in hindsight, making that move and changing that relationship was one of the best things that I ever did. That was the point in time where I learned a lot more about myself, the things that I did like, the things that I didn't like. I was making more money because I had moved into the mining industry. I'd moved out of home, so I was being independent. And I also met a whole new cohort of people that I didn't know while I was still living at home with mum and dad in the bubble that I had grown up with. So it was very eye-opening, and it actually probably got me more motivated to go and hit goals than I was prior to doing this. Now it was choppy during that 12-month period of time until I did get settled down again and get realigned. But the lesson there is often the best things in life come badly wrapped, and what seems potentially like a bad thing at the outset can actually turn out being one of the best things that's ever happened to you. And I'm assuming that a lot of people have heard about the stories where people go through a divorce, for example. It's the worst thing that happens in their life. Then you ask that person 5 years later, how are you feeling after the divorce? And they said, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I've never been happier. Or someone who gets the health scare and gets told that they have cancer or something like that. 5 years later, that person's beat the disease, and the same thing, you ask them, how's your life now? And they said, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me because it was the kick in the butt that I needed to go and get fit and healthy and start living the life that I wanted to live. So that year in my life of 2017 was that year that I realized that life happens for you, not to you, and to take all of those things in your stride. Now, 2018 comes around, I'm 22 years old, and I get to purchase my third investment property, which I was very, very excited about. But now I was 22, I was living out of home, I had 3 investment properties, and I was standing on my own 2 feet. And what I started to feel is that although I had 3 properties, a lot of my income now was going to servicing mortgages, and I actually started to feel poorer, even though on paper, I was richer than I had ever been from a net worth point of view. And the lesson that I learned in that year is that when you are growing your wealth, you are going to feel poorer before you feel richer, especially when it comes to building wealth through real estate. Because a lot of the money that you are making is on paper money, meaning that if a property is worth $1 million today and it's worth $1.2 million next year, sure, you've made $200,000, but that $200,000 isn't in your back pocket, it's equity in the property. And unless you sell that property or you refinance that property and release the equity, you don't actually have access to that money. So essentially now I had 3 properties, I had 3 mortgages, I was living in a share house, I obviously had to pay for all the stuff a normal person has to pay for. And although I wasn't doing it tough, this was the first time in my life that I actually had started to feel the pinch. I had to pay all my mortgages, I had to pay all my bills. Before then, I had the ability to go and spend money on myself. Now, there was a blessing in disguise there because it meant that I had a forced savings account. I didn't have the ability to go and spend all this money and then work out what I did for the rest of the week when my money ran out. I had to pay the bank first and pay my mortgages first, which is essentially a forced savings account as those properties grow in value. I then had to pay my own living expenses. And then with what was left over, I could obviously go then and enjoy myself or save that money. And I can attest to that lesson even more now as I'm another 7 years down the journey since 2018. And although on paper I am significantly richer than I was back in 2018, I also have a significant amount more commitments every single week than I had back then. So again, I probably feel poorer now and have less freedom now than I did back in 2018 because now I have a business, I have staff, I have more properties and more debt, and all those things have to be paid for before then you can enjoy yourself with whatever money is left over. So the key lesson here is that as you start to grow your wealth and get wealthier on paper, there is a very good chance that you will not feel wealthier and you will actually feel poorer. But the key here is to hold the assets long enough and to ride out that poor feeling for a long enough period of time so you can eventually be significantly wealthier. Because if you don't feel poorer in the short term because you're investing and you live rich, by living rich right now, you will be real poor in 20 years time. 2019 comes around, I'm 23 years old, I've got 3 properties, I'm working in the construction and mining industry, and I'm making great money. In the majority of people's eyes, I'm an overachieving 23-year-old that has a really strong future and strong career ahead of him. But in my eyes, I was at a crossroads because although I had 3 investment properties and I was earning great money, I was in a career that I wasn't passionate about. I was hanging out with people in that career every single day that I wouldn't associate with outside of work. And because I had broadened my network over the past few years, I had started to meet people that were running their own businesses, that were living incredible lives, and that had a life that was really exciting to me. Do I continue down this easy path in mining and construction, earning great money, consistent job, safe, nothing really can go all that wrong, and I'd already got 3 investment properties? Or should I take another path, which was the unknown path, the path of starting my own business, changing industries, and starting again from zero while having 3 mortgages and all the expenses that I had built up over the past 5 or 6 years that I had been working? Now, fortunately for me, I did decide to take the leap. I left mining and construction, I went back to Sydney, and I started my career in the property sector because it was something that I had become so passionate about, and I spent every second of my spare time either researching, listening to podcasts, reading books, and getting inspired about. But the challenge was I left a career that was paying me almost double 6 figures for a career that was paying me $0 as a salary. I was working under a brand. They were paying me commission only, which essentially meant if I wasn't getting clients and I wasn't doing deals, I wasn't getting paid. And I only had a relatively small amount of cash, which was going to give me enough living expense for 6 months, which meant if I didn't get momentum in the first 6 months of my new career and I wasn't starting to make money, I would have had to put my tail between my legs, go back to Newcastle and get back into the mining and construction industry and say, at least I give it a crack. And that was really the thing that gave me the confidence to go and give my newfound career a crack, which was what was the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario was I go try a new career, It doesn't work out like I think it's going to work out. I run out of money and then I go and get another job in mining and construction, which there are an abundance of those kind of jobs. And I thought that's not that bad of an issue. If I need to go back and get a job, the only thing that will be hurt is my ego, because all the people that I told I'm leaving this career, I'm going to go make it big time in the property industry, would have said, "Ha, I told you so." That's not going to work. Reflecting back on that decision, obviously I'm extremely happy that I've made it, because now I get to do what I love every single day and make amazing money while I do it. But if I never took that leap back in 2019, I never would have had these experiences, and I never would have then gotten the confidence to continue to take more and more leaps. So by taking that leap and it working out, obviously that then built my self-confidence to say, okay, well, if I can do it once, why can't I do that multiple times in other areas of my life? Why can't I set a goal, go after that goal, actually achieve it, and then continue along that journey, which is exactly what I've done since then. But the key is to actually take the leap, which is where so many people get stuck, is that they never take the leap. And one of the things I remember so vividly about my childhood is my mum and dad always used to say, oh, if I was 10 years younger, or if I was 15 years younger, I would start that business. And my father worked in civil construction. He ended up becoming a foreman and being quite high up in the company. But he always had that desire to go and do it the way that he wanted to do it. And as he got further into his life and had myself and my brother, and obviously you got kids and a mortgage and everything else, you have life's baggage, and it makes it much harder to take the leap, because in your mind you have much more at risk. That always was in my mind, and I thought, I don't want to be that person who gets to 45, 50, 60 years old and goes, I wish I would have taken the leap younger. So the key lesson from 2019 for me was take the leap. Work out what the worst case scenario is. Generally, it's not that bad. And if you can accept the worst case scenario, then go balls to the wall and give it your all. I'm 24 years old. It's 2020. COVID had just shook the world. It was a very choppy time as I'd gotten into a new industry. I remember I started in the October of 2019. I learnt the ropes from October until December. I did one transaction. I think I made $5,000 or $6,000 in that 3-month period. From January, I hired my first employee, who is Sam, and he's still with us today. January to March, we had an incredible start to the new year, got a lot of momentum. And then from March, April of 2020, the COVID lockdown shook the world. I earned $0 from March until August of that year because everything was shut down. Now that was a very, very scary time. I didn't have a huge cash buffer. I actually had 3 staff in my inner team that I had to pay during that time. And I was renting an apartment in Coogee. I had a car and I had all this stuff because I thought I was going to go grow a huge business. That 4 or 5 month period was very scary, but the very fortunate thing that come off the back of that is as we come out of lockdown, the property market really took off because interest rates had gone down. There was stimulus being pumped into the marketplace. And fortunately, being in the real estate sector, we felt the positive effects of that, which meant we were doing a lot of transactions, we were buying clients a lot of property, and I was making a lot of money in comparison to what I was making in the mining industry. And what I learned from that is because my income was growing so rapidly, that directly correlated to what my borrowing capacity was from an investment point of view and how much money I could then go and spend on real estate. Now, because I hadn't been in business for longer than a 12-month period, I actually couldn't go buy any more real estate. But because I'm constantly in contact with brokers and I was working in the industry, I was talking to brokers about, hey, if I make this much money, how much money can I then borrow? Which was really exciting to me. And what that lesson taught me is that your borrowing capacity and your ability to go and invest and buy property is directly correlated to how much money that you earn, which I actually didn't understand up until that point. I'd seen all of these people building these huge portfolios and thought, how do they do that on a small or average-ish income? And then I learned that the reason they're able to build huge portfolios is because they're able to increase their income. And I'd felt like I'd cracked the code because I'd started in a new industry. I started to make more money than I'd ever made before. And because I'd made more money than I ever made before, I was able to go and then borrow more money and buy more real estate. So then I just created this goal for myself, which was, if I want to go buy more real estate, I need to work out how much money I need to make to borrow that amount of money. And that then becomes my income goal. And it also taught me that if you don't want to get stuck as a property investor, you're going to go through different seasons. Some of those seasons are going to be about using equity to go and use the borrowing capacity that you already have to buy more real estate. And some of those seasons are going to be allow your portfolio to grow and focus on growing your income. So when you have the equity available, you can then go use it and buy more real estate. So I had just gone through the season of my life, which was buy property, use the serviceability that you've already gotten. Then I maxed my serviceability out on my mining income. I'd moved into this new career where I had an unlimited ability to earn money because I was running my own business inside of someone else's, which then gave me the ability to go and make more money and borrow more money, which I then knew the following year, which is going to be 2021, which I'll touch on next, I could then use the equity that was in my portfolio, combine that with my new income, to then go buy and scale my portfolio, which takes me to 2021, where I was 25 years old. I just finished my first full 12 months in a new industry. I'd made 3 times the amount of money that I made in my last year of mining, and the property market had gone through an extreme growth period due to COVID. So all of a sudden I had a huge amount of equity that I could use, plus I had a huge amount of borrowing capacity that I could use. And that then taught me that if you go through these seasons of your life and use them strategically, you can have extreme growth in short periods of time. Because in 2021, when I was 25 years old, I took my portfolio from being 3 properties worth about $4 million to 7 properties worth in excess of over $12 million in 1 year. So I essentially 3x'd my portfolio, or grew it by over 300% in 1 year. And the reason I was able to do that is because my portfolio had given me the equity I needed for the deposits to go buy more real estate. And my new career had given me the income I needed to then go borrow the money I needed to go buy the real estate. So if I didn't have the income, I wouldn't have had the serviceability. And if I didn't have the properties that I purchased years prior, I wouldn't have had the equity I needed to be able to use that serviceability. So it's very important. And the lesson that I learned is that as we go through these seasons, there's going to be a season for growing your portfolio, and there's going to be a season for growing your income. And when you go through those seasons and then combine the two together, that's when you can have explosive growth. And I know a lot of people we speak to about growing their portfolios and building their wealth, they get disheartened when the bank tells them, hey, you can't borrow any more money. But essentially all that means is we won't lend you any more money right now, which then gives you the indication to say, hey, okay, I'm now going into the season where it's less about my portfolio growth and it is more about my income growth, which then pivots your focus to go, how can I become more valuable? How can I make more money? And then when I do that, I will then be able to go and grow my portfolio and grow my wealth even further. 2022 comes around. I'm 26 years old. I've just scaled my portfolio. It's now worth over $15 million just due to the crazy growth we were seeing in the marketplace over those years. I'd done huge refinances. I'd used all of my equity to go and buy more real estate. But one thing that I hadn't experienced yet was a little bit of financial adversity. And what I mean by that is everything had gone extremely well. From when I turned 18 and bought my first property to 26, which is essentially 8 years, everything had just gotten better year after year. Sure, there have been times where things have been a little bit tighter than other years, but rates had been declining. My income had been growing. I always had cash in the bank and I'd never really been financial stressed. But in 2022, going into 2023, that changed for me. Interest rates started to rise in May of 2022. That then slowed our business growth down, which meant our profitability shrunk. So I was making less money. I'd had more debt than I'd ever carried before, which meant my expenses were larger than I'd ever had before. I was enjoying my newfound wealth. I'd bought supercars. I lived in an incredible property. I had larger expenses than I'd ever had before. And I was about to experience my first piece of adversity in the media. And the lesson that I learned as I was going through 2022, and that I learned even more in 2023, is that you must always carry a buffer regardless of how much of a superstar you think you are. Now, in my case, I thought life just keeps getting better. I kept making more money. I never had to really worry about money. I was investing heavily. I was buying and spending like the money was never going to run out. And then in May of 22, when rates started to increase, cash flow started to dry out, business started to get harder, and I was about to be hammered in the media, and I financially wasn't prepared for this and the stress it was about to put on my life. There may not be anything that ever happens, but if you are prepared for something, if and when it does happen, you won't be as stressed. I was not prepared for this. I wasn't sitting on a lot of cash, and I was sitting on $1 million of equity only a few months prior, but I decided to go push all of that money into the marketplace, buy more properties, increase my debt. All of a sudden, things were starting to change, and I started to really stress, and it gave me a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress in that period of my life, which lasted for about 12 or 18 months. The silver lining in this is it built a huge amount of resilience, a huge amount of self-confidence to think that I've got myself into this shit. There's a lot of people who wanted to see me fail and a lot of people who wanted to see me fall because I was growing and my brand was growing really quickly. But the reality is I could have made that period of my life significantly easier if I had just been sitting on a big cash buffer like I could have been and not overextended myself. So the key lesson here is regardless of how good things are going right now, that can all change in very quick succession. It only takes a few things to fall and a few of those dominoes to start to follow, and all of a sudden your life can be very, very different. So the key lesson for me in 2022 is, Jack, you aren't a superstar like you think you are. The world can show you how quickly it can crush you. So make sure you are always prepared with a cash buffer so you can be less stressed, make better decisions, and not feel pressured into certain situations. Off the back of a very stressful 2022, we come into 2023, and the key learning from 2023 was, how bad do you want it? Now, up until this point, I was very good at sharing my successes, everything that had been going well in my life, telling everyone about my dreams and aspirations, and that's very easy to do when everything's going well. Now in 22 and 23, things got harder for me. I'd faced more adversity. I was hammered in the media in 2023, and I had a lot of things going against me. Everything that I'd set up until this point was, I wanted to be a billionaire. I want to grow a global organization. I want to have this huge portfolio. I'm driving around in a supercar like a rock star. And I just had to ask myself this question: how bad do you want it? Because the reality is there's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times, there's going to be indifferent times. And it's easy to say you want it when things are going well. And it's also much easier to give up and take the easy route. The reality is I could have shrunk the company, sold off some properties, got out of the media and taken my face off social media so no one knew who I was, run a business doing a few $1 million a year, super profitable, and be much less stressed. But that would have been a very, very different life to the life that I thought that I'd wanted. So that was the decision I was faced with. Do I continue to go down this path of scaling my business, scaling my portfolio, scaling my personal brand and telling people about the things that I'm doing and being very open with everyone? Or did I just want to take the easy path because things got a little bit hard, just focus on making good money, living a good life and having much less stress? It was also the first year that the business had shrunk. Every year up until this point, the business had gotten bigger and bigger every single year. I'd made more and more money every single year. In 2023, we were 30% down on the year prior. And with being 30% down on the year prior, profit essentially went to zero that year. But the key lesson here for me, after I asked myself, how bad do you really want it? Is that when you make the decision to not give up, and just to be laser focused on whatever that goal is, you can get through anything that you set your mind to, but you have to have a reason for doing it. During 2023, one of the biggest reasons that I didn't want to give up is because there was all of these people who were literally just sitting on their seats with popcorn, just waiting for it all to collapse, waiting for me to say, fuck this, I'm out, or something really bad to happen. And I was saying to myself, do you really want to allow these people to be right? Now, that mindset is not a sustainable mindset long term. But when you're in the depths of something that is really intense in your life, they're the kind of things, from my point of view, which is what you need to be able to get out of bed every day. Visualizing those people who want to see you fail and allowing them to be your energy to go, there's not a fucking chance in hell someone like you is going to see me fail, because that's what you want. And that's the thing that allowed me to keep going. Now, fortunately for me, we got through 2023. Everything turned out to be amazing. The following year, being 2024, which I'm just about to touch on, was our biggest ever year in business. We grew the business by 500%. But if I didn't make that decision in 2023 to keep going at it, keep trying new things, and keep pushing through the pain, 2024 would have been a very, very, very different year. And I probably wouldn't be recording this video today. So remember, when things get hard, you have two decisions to make. Dig deep and keep chasing your goals, and when you get through the other side, things will look very bright. or take the easy option, give up like most people do, and just be average like 90% of people are in the world. Now that I'd gotten through 2023, 2024 had come around, I'd seen the light at the end of the tunnel, the business really started to scale, I had the right people in the right seats in the company, and it had almost been 10 years since I'd started my property investing journey back in 2015 when I was 18 years old. And what I learned from 2024 is that thinking in decades, not in years, is really the thing that allows you to grow significant wealth. Now, what I mean by that is the only thing in my life that I'd stuck at for 10 years. You know, from when I was 8 years old to when I was 18 years old, I hadn't done anything. So from 18 to 28, that had been the first time that I actually consistently stuck at one thing year after year and actually allowed myself to get the compounding effect. Now, not just in growing wealth and growing my portfolio, but the compound effect in education, the compounding effect of business, the compounding effect of building a brand and a reputation. And I was finally at the stage where I could reflect on the past 9 to 10 years and go, wow, look how far I've come in 10 years. At 18 years old, when I bought my first property, when I was working in construction, if you would have told me that year to say, hey, Jack, in 10 years time, you're gonna have 50 to 100 staff, you're gonna have a growing business, you had a portfolio that was worth circa $35 million, I wouldn't have believed it. And the reason for that is because I didn't have the experience of being able to reflect at 18 back 10 years to see a decade's worth of growth. In 2024, which was last year, I was 28 years old and now I could see 10 years worth of work, 10 years worth of consistency, 10 years worth of compounding. And it then gave me the proof and solidified that the longer you stick at something, the more consistent you are, the further and further you will get. And the amazing thing about that was I also could compare myself to other people who had started in 2018 at a similar time to me to look at both of our journeys. Now, I'm not saying comparing yourself to other people is the right thing to do because it's not. But what is right is to be able to compare to what could have been. I looked at people when I started investing in 2018, when I started to get into this property world, I looked at people who were doing really well to me at that point in time. Other people who had also bought their first properties, people that I heard on podcasts, for example. And then I looked last year at people, those same people, 10 years on, next to no one had done anything in that period of time. Most of their names were no longer around. I couldn't actually find the majority of them, what they were doing, where they were. And what that proved to me is most people can do things in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. They can go hard for a short period of time, but very, very few people can do things consistently for a long period of time. The top 50 Forbes list just come out a few weeks ago. You look at the people on that list. Every single one of them has been doing things for decades and decades and decades, whether it's them individually or a part of a family business. The reason they've been able to grow their businesses, their lives, their wealth to that scale is not because they get in and out of something every 12 or 24 months. It's because they stay in things for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You look at someone like Jack Cowan, for example, the founder of Hungry Jack's. You know, the guy's 70 plus years old and still getting after it today. He's worth about $4 billion. And I can assure you, if he would have stopped growing his empire after 5 years, do you really think he'd be worth $4 billion? Probably not. And if I would have known at 18 that if I stuck at it, my life would end up where I am right now, it would have been so much easier to stick with it. But fortunately, I'm one of those people who, when they're committed to something, doesn't really allow things to get in my way. But the proof that I have now of sticking with something for 10 years only means good things. It's going to make it so much easier for the next 10, 20, 30 years to consistently stick at it. And the reason for that is because now I have 10 years worth of proof to say that if you do something for a long period of time, only good stuff can come from it. Regardless if good things and bad things happen along the way, good things mean that you're making the right actions and bad things mean that you get lessons to be able to make the right actions. So think in decades, not in years, if you want to build significant wealth and an incredible life for yourself. And that brings me up to 2025, which is the year we're in right now. I'm turning 29 years old this year. And the lesson that I've already gotten, being 3 to 4 months into the year, is that the mountains just keep getting bigger. Remember back to when you were a kid, I remember this for myself. You play local sport. You know, you might be in the footy team, the soccer team. doing whatever you're doing, and you're playing local teams, okay? You can be the best person or the best team in the local comp and you feel like a superstar. Because you're the best team in the local comp, you then go to the regional competition. You go to the regional competition, which is the best teams from every local squad in the region, and all of a sudden, you come last and you feel, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am, because now I'm not playing against other people in my local area, I'm playing against people in the regional area. And then the winner of the regional comp goes to the state titles, and then the state titles goes to the national titles. And what you realize is that at every level, there is a new benchmark. There is a new bad, there is a new good, and there is a new exceptional. And what I realized as I've grown the business, I've grown my wealth, is that I no longer compare myself or have to compete with the local guys. I'm no longer competing in business with 1 and 2 man bands. They're not in the conversation anymore. I'm no longer investing or buying properties against mum and dad investors. My fitness challenges are no longer a half marathon or a marathon or something that may be extreme to people who are not athletes, but very easy for people who love to train and love to challenge themselves. So now I'm 2025. I've done a lot of stuff over the last 10 years. I've grown a lot of wealth. I'm growing a business. I know a lot of very wealthy and very successful people. And the fitness challenges I choose to do for myself are extreme challenges. And because I continue to level up, I continue to feel like a beginner every time I go to a new level. For example, I just joined a business group, which is a global business organization with the biggest business owners in the world. And when I say the biggest, it's not an exaggeration. You need a minimum of $25 million revenue in Australia to get in. If you're in international cities, that revenue number is north of sometimes $100 million. A lot of Australia's billionaires are in it, a lot of international billionaires. And essentially what I'm getting at is I am now a very small fish in a very big pond. I think my business is big when I'm comparing it to local businesses. When you compare your business to global businesses, people do more revenue in one day than we do in a full year, which is just wild to think about. This year I'm running a 200-mile run, which is 320 Ks. It'll be over 3.5 to 4 days, no sleep, which is extreme in comparison to the marathon that I first started running 4 or 5 years ago. The properties I'm looking at purchasing now are no longer $600,000 and $700,000 apartments or houses. They're properties worth $5, $10, $15 million, which require huge amounts of capital and huge amounts of risk to go and execute on those things. So the lesson in 2025 is it's very good to be humbled, because you think you are good until you go and compete with the best. So I'm no longer playing at a local level. I'm playing at a much larger level now, and the competition excites me. And I've learned over the last 10 years that if I'm not being challenged, I'm not growing. So I can't wait to see what 2025 and beyond has in store for myself and the team and the business. And I also can't wait to be able to share the next 10 years with you in 2035, where I'll be 38 turning 39 years old, and see how much the lessons change over this next decade as opposed to the last decade that I've just gone through. Now, just to recap on the 10 lessons from the last 10 years. The first lesson that I got back in 2015 when I was 18 years old was a little sacrifice goes a long way. In 2016, it is 2 is better than 1 and 10 is better than 2, which is all around setting goals and chasing them once you can see that they are achievable. In 2017, it was life happens for you, not to you, and it essentially means that some of the best gifts in life come badly wrapped. Lesson 4 is you will feel poorer before you feel richer when you are on your wealth creation journey, because all of your money is going into growing your wealth as opposed to spending it and being a consumer. In 2019, the lesson was take the leap. Taking the leap has been one of the best things that has ever happened in my life, and I will continue to take the leap at every opportunity that I have. In 2020, it was all around growing your income means growing your borrowing capacity, and growing your borrowing capacity means being able to grow your wealth even further. In 2021, it was equity plus that income growth equals explosive portfolio growth, and understanding that you are going to go through seasons in your life where you will focus on income growth in some season and you will focus on portfolio growth in other seasons. When I was 26, the lesson I learned was always keep a buffer, because you are never too much of a superstar for life to smash you in the face. In 2023, when I was 27, the lesson was how bad do you really want it, and are you really going to do what you said you are going to do? Last year when I was 28, the lesson was think in decades, not in years, because the longer the time horizon that you think in, the more that you can achieve. And I can assure you, if I knew at 18 what I was going to achieve by 28, it would have made the journey so much easier. And this year in 2025, it's all about making sure that you continue to level up and not stay in the local leagues, because you are not as good as you think you are when you compare to all the incredible people out there in the world. And the lesson that ties all of these together, and the thing that actually makes all of these lessons possible, is one word, and that is action. If you do not take action and you do not get started, regardless of where you are, you could be the low of the low, you could come from the wealthiest family in the world, it doesn't matter. Without action, you will get nowhere and you will be no one. So take action and start today. If you want to learn about my property investing strategy, how I've been able to grow my wealth over the last 10 years to scale my portfolio to almost $40 million today, as I stand here recording this at 28 years old, then watch this video here where I run through the exact strategy, step by step, exactly what you have to do at every single point in the journey, and how you can scale your portfolio even if you have no properties and no money today.